Hey everybody, we're doing a video for Avenue de l'Opera, which you can see here, this wonderful kit that Michael created based on a Grovian Doll Museum original. And it's an incredible design. And it looks quite complex, but it's really not that difficult. It's a cape, which I'm going to take off now so you can actually see the bodice, and I'll rotate her around a little bit. It's this sort of princess sort of style bodice that's trimmed with gold soutache, faux chenille fur, and these little tufts of black fur, and and fringe, which you're going to create, and it goes over this incredible skirt. I mean, look at the size of that with the train. And the skirt is decorated in the very same way with the chenille fur, the soutache, these little lozenge shapes of the blue silk, just really very elegant and, you know, gorgeous. And as you can see, this is it's a huge skirt. So Michael and the team have included material and a pattern for this crinoline, which will help to support this and give it the shape that's required for the mid-1860s. So this is a really fun project. I think you're going to have a lot of, as I said, a lot of fun with it. Don't be intimidated. You know, this is just as long as you go sort of like slowly, you won't make any mistakes. Hopefully the video will help you. If you have any questions, please just reach out. But I think, I have to say, this is probably one of my favorite kits that I've actually made that Michael and the team have designed. I really just think it's beautiful, especially on Carl Armstrong's reproduction to Horrors. That is just absolutely gorgeous. And here's the cape as well. The cape is going to be lined with it's the same silk that it's made out of. It has a hood, more of a decorative hood, and it's trimmed again with the chenille and the black fur. So it's just very, very elegant. And Michael's also created in your kit, you're going to have a gorgeous one-of-a-kind headdress for this particular outfit that Michael has created. And I hope that you have fun with this. I think I would love to see what you make. And I think there's a lot of potential to use this pattern and just make it out of different materials, different trims. This is a really classic style of the mid-1860s in France. So we're starting Avenue de l'Opera. And this is a great pattern. It's very, very clear. One thing I do want to say is that before you start, you should always read through the instructions. And you should always do things in the order that they're recommended to be done in. And you may have a copy of the pattern that says to start with the bodice first. But I think it's really important when you're creating these these 19th century costumes, or really any era, is to start with a proper underpinnings. And in this case, it would be the crinoline. And then you're going to be fitting your skirt over the crinoline, your bodice over the skirt that's over the crinoline, and then the cape doesn't really need any fitting. But what's really important here is just making sure that you're conforming to the silhouette and that you're fitting to the silhouette. The crinoline is a very, very simple garment. It's basically a front piece that's cut on the fold and then two identical backs. It's seamed with the short sides together and sewn with 1/4 inch. And I've pressed it open. I've actually used the machine for this because I really want it to be strong. And I've pressed those open. And then from the back, what you're going to do is you're going to apply this binding tape. Now, one thing just so you know is that you're going to need to later, I actually chose to do it before, but you can do it later. You're going to have to cut a little slit only in the top of the binding. Only in the top that's going to be facing you, or the piece, the front that's going to be facing you. You're going to want to create that little slit because once this gets seamed together, you're going to run your wire through this little channel. So when you're stitching, you're going to want to stitch really close to this edge, like a 1/16 or you know, really just as close as you can just by catching that. and then you'll create this little pocket for the wire. You're going to be doing this 2 inches from what I'm calling the hem, and then you're going to do it another 2 inches up, and then another 2 inches up. So you're basically repeating this 3 times. Now you have more than enough bias trim to do this. You could pin it down first, or you could just do it, experiment, do one, and then go on to do the other. But really not very complicated, just a lot of sort of careful machine sewing. One thing that's great is that the piece of tarlatan that you have in your kit is going to be big enough that you're going to have a nice amount left over. But be careful when you're laying it out. You will have enough left over if you cut it, if you make sure that you're cutting it correctly before you actually cut the pieces out. And then you'll have a nice bit left over to make hats or line something else, because this is such a great material. So I'm going to continue doing this. And as you can see, it's following the curve. I'm going to go all the way around, and I'll probably do all of them and then come back and show you. One thing I didn't say, and very important, is that the bias should be applied to the inside of the crinoline. So you can see here's your raw seam, and you don't have to finish these in anyway because it doesn't fray. You're going to be applying it to the inside. And that way, when you see the outside, you're just going to see 2 lines of stitching. It's going to make a really beautiful effect. So I will continue to pin, then I'll come back and I will show you the next step. So we've sewn all of the tape down. This is the reverse side. And we've sewn it, I'm not sure if you could see this on the camera, but we sewed it very close to the edge. I mean, I think that's probably a little bit under 1/16 of an inch. So as close as you can get to the edge without going over on either side. And one thing that I found was worked for me, might work for you. The first crinoline I made, I've used pins. But I don't really like having to maneuver with all those pins when I'm doing such a tight, top stitching. So I basted along, I pinned it, and then I basted through the middle all the way along. And that just really helped to stabilize it a little bit. I see some threads I need to clean up here. So, this just shows you if you go off, which I did, you can go back and you can resew it. And no one's really going to see that. You're going to know about it, and you might clean it up a little better than I did. Then we press that, and this is the front side. All of our Frixion markings came off really beautifully. And then what we're going to do is there's a length of lace in your kit. You're going to approximately 1/4 of an inch above that cut edge on the front. You're going to pin the lace in place, and you're going to take a little tuck. And then you're going to take another little tuck. And this, I think there's a dimension given in the pattern, but I just sort of eyeballed it. And even with eyeballing it, let me just see what was. It's probably like, I think they call for 1/8 of an inch tuck, and mine are sort of like 3/16, 1/4 of an inch. And they're about a little under, but 7/8 apart. But, you can measure this. You can do whatever you want. I just eyeballed it. And then you sew that down pretty much underneath this top header, the lace header. And you sew that all the way across. And, you're going to have a little piece of lace. You should probably have a little piece of lace left over. One other thing just to note is that this lace has a right and a wrong side. I had to learn that the hard way, but you have a very smooth side, and that's the front face of the lace, and you have a side that has these little tufts and little slubs, and that's the back side. So what we did next was we measured down 4.5 inches. And we clipped into the seam allowance 1/4 of an inch. We turned that over, we pressed it, and then we just stitched it very close to that cut edge, top stitched it on both sides. So after I had done that, I ran 2 rows of gathering stitches, or sometimes you call them basting stitches, along the top, and started to prepare the waistband. Now, one thing in the directions, it's going to say to use the crinoline for the waistband, and I think you can do that. I like to I would like to use a piece of batiste because I think that this is like, crinoline is a little bit bulky, but also the batiste allows you, and you'll see this in one of the next steps, the batiste allows you to, pull it in a little bit. It has a little bit of a more of a give to it. And you'll see how that works. But by all means, you can do the crinoline waistband as well. Most important thing is for you to measure your doll's waist. These are handmade bodies, and they're all going to vary a little bit. I measured mine. I think she was 6 inches, and I cut a 7-inch waistband and turned in the seam allowance on both sides and on one long edge. And that's what we're going to be sewing along this raw edge. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my basting stitches. I'm just going to align. Let me just make sure I'm on the right side. The light is so bright in here, I can't tell. I'm just going to make sure these basting stitches are out of the way. I'm just going to align those short ends. If you really want to be particular, you can find the middle of your waistband and match it with the middle of the front panel, because then you'll know that you'll have really even distribution. But I'm going to do it like this because I need to move on to the next thing. So we're going to pin this in place. Let's just see how we are in terms of width. Yeah, we have to come in a little bit. So let's... What's the trickiest thing about this type of gathering, which I really love because it's so simple, just to make sure you're pulling the right threads. So I'm gonna just loop this around here like this and just see how that works. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. Let's do the next one. Again, trying to find the right threads. I'm not sure if you can see all this. Let's see. Yeah, it's just sort of, again, I eyeball things, and you can make little adjustments if you need to. I'm just going to pull this a little bit tighter, and then I'm going to do that. Cheryl Williams did this. I think it's so smart to tie off your gathers like that. Really was a great tip. So I'm going to distribute my gathers, trying to distribute them evenly. You can actually also just adjust by pulling a little bit. And I'm going to align the cut edge of the crinoline with the top edge of the waistband. And I'm going to do that all the way across. You're just going to make sure that when you sew this down, you're not going to catch any of those gathers. Well, the gathers, the folds of the gathers, you just don't want to do that. You want to make sure that it's that it doesn't overlap or fall back on itself, because you just don't want it. Let me just see. So I'm just going to continue doing this across. I'll pull it up a little bit more. I was thinking when I was sewing this how it must have been such a godsend, the sewing machine, because I do all of my, well, I would say probably 99% of all my sewing is done by hand, and on these long seams, and especially on that binding, this is like really a lifesaver. And I can just imagine what a lifesaver it was for tailors and ladies and everyone else who was sewing in the 19th century, because they could get more done in less time. So it was a huge time savings. I think it's just really fascinating how it probably changed people's lives. So I'm just going to continue to pin, pull up a little bit more, and distribute a little bit more. There we go. Okay. So, here we go. Okay, you don't have to watch me doing all this. It's silly. I will sew this along, or at least under the line of the lower row of gathering. I'm going to sew this down. Sometimes what I do like to do is I like to, press the top of the gathers just a little bit, because I feel like it makes them more controllable, and also sort of helps them to stay in place. So I'm just going to give this a little bit of a press before I take it to the sewing machine, and it will sort of help give it a little bit of memory. Okay. So because this is really tight, and this does have it's a tight gather, and it has a little curve to it, I would say, you want to sew it and make sure that this doesn't fold back up on itself. So make sure that when you're sewing it really carefully. You might want to even put a little pin down here just to keep that from riding up. And then what we're going to do is I'm going to come back. I'm going to show you how we finish off the waistband, or how the waistband is finished off. And then we're going to close up the back seam. Probably we'll do that even before I show you how we finish this off. But we're going to close up the back seam. We're going to be matching our channels. Remember, we already cut little slits, pre-cut slits, but if you haven't done that, you need to do that now, because that's where the cord is going to go in. And just make sure that when you do that, that you're not cutting past this first layer. I think I explained that, but this is basically a fold, another fold, and then it's folded in on itself. You don't want to cut into this back. You just want to make sure you're cutting the top, because what you really want to do is use this as a channel, and you don't want the wire to go through to the other side, because that will just be a headache. So I'm going to go off and sew this, and probably sew up the back, and then talk to you about how we insert the wire, which is really simple. It's just, you just have to take your time and be careful with it, but it's really easy. So basically, you're looking at the inside of the petticoat, crinoline rather. We've just turned that over to the inside and slip stitched it along, slip stitch it closed. Now, I left the ends open, and the reason why I left the ends open, and this is a little different than the instructions, is I ran the cotton tape, with a large eye needle, a blunt needle. I ran it through that channel, and that's going to enable me. You see a little bit of blood there. Oh, I've got to get that off. That enables me or enables us to be able to pull this a little bit tighter around the waist, and just get a really good snug fit. But if you don't want to do that, just make sure that this is exactly the size of your doll's waist, that there's no overlap, and then sew the tape to either end securely from the inside, so you don't see it from the outside. In the case, if you are going to use a drawstring, I took a little tack in the middle through to the back, just to keep that tape from coming out and allow it to be pulled really snugly and not fall out. One thing I do want to say, and I apologize for this, is I'm in a hurry because I have a lot to do in these videos, but I think that it's really important for you to match the center of the waistband to the center of the crinoline and your ends, because I feel like this is not centered. I think there's far more space on this side than there is on this side. I'm not really happy with it, but this is for me. If I was doing this for a client, I would rip it out and do it again. But since this is for me and it's just for purposes of demonstration, I think it's fine. So we've sewed up the back. We've matched our channels. If you see from the front, they're pretty much matched. I have to, again, clean up a few little stray threads. And then we're going to take I guess this is a millinery wire. We're going to take this millinery wire, and you could probably fit it through with the end just as is, but I sometimes think that this little metal piece can get caught on things. So what I do is I take some just clear gift wrap tape, Scotch tape, and I wrap it around just to keep it sort of all together and smooth, so it will go through smoothly. And this is where those little channels came in. So you can see we've got this little channel here. If I can just get into it. Come on. It always feels like when you're trying to demonstrate something is when you can't do it. But let me see, I just want to make sure this channel's open. There we go. Hopefully that'll work now. Okay. So this is where you really just have to have a little bit of patience because this is quite the process. The wire has a memory to it. It's curved and it's going to continue to curve. So what you need to do is just very sort of like gently, and it's okay for you to you know, pull up or gather up or manipulate the crinoline because it's very sturdy and you're going to be able to iron it afterwards. You're just going to keep feeding it through this channel. I would start at the top and then go down. I just think it would be slightly easier to do it that way. Yeah, I mean, even though this has been stitched very close, this casing has been stitched very close to the edges, you know, it's still a bit of a snug. It's a little snug. It'll go through. I've done this before. It'll go through, but you know, you just need to like make sure that you're putting it in evenly, that it's not going through to the other side for whatever reason. If it is, stop, pull out, and then just readjust it. You're just going to kind of continue to go around. I'm not going to bore you with all of this, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to do these three, and then I'm going to show you how we join the wire at the back, which is they've given you these little, I think they're called ferrules, but these little ways of joining the cut ends of the wire together that's really smart and probably very similar to or identical to what they used in the 19th century. So I'm going to continue doing this. See, it's like you just have to take your time. I could probably even be going a little slower and just make sure that you're feeding it through consistently and evenly. And smoothing out you don't want this to be gathered, okay? You want this to be, you want it to be flat, but it's going to gather a little bit as you're putting it on. You just want to make sure that you smooth out those gathers. Yeah, there we go. You know, what's great about this material, this tarlatan or crinoline, is that it irons really well, and when you iron it, it kind of remembers it remembers its starchiness, or the starchiness comes back. So you can, once you're done with this, you can just, you know, gently iron it, and you're going to get rid of all those gathers in the crinoline itself. Okay, so here we are coming out the other side. And also another thing, I would not cut these lengths until you are I wouldn't cut this wire into the length of your channels, because you might make a miscalculation, then you might not have enough wire. I think you're going to have more than enough, but I just think it's easier to do this way, where you know you have exactly the circumference that you need. So I'm going to make sure that there are no gathers on this, because this next part is going to be important, and I will show that when we come back. One thing just to say is that you're going to want this, when you do cut this, you're going to want this to have an overlap, because what we're going to do is we're going to be cutting the wire to fit the ferrule, and I'll show that to you in the next step. But get your wire cutters, cut it, and then we'll go on, we'll tape our next one, and you could already see this taking shape, which is so cool, interesting to see that silhouette, you know. And when you've done this, you can like have some fun, and like, you know, if you want it a little more oval, because the skirt is more oval, you can shape it. You can you could really just play with it however you want. So I'm going to continue to feed in the wire. Make sure that you have enough when you've done it on either side, that you don't cut it so they meet. You don't want that. You're going to do that in the next step, just in case you don't have, in case you need a little bit of wiggle room. So I will be back after I have fed through the middle and the bottom rows, and then I'm going to show you how we join those. But what I wanted to show you is that we've run the wire through our casings, and we've done it on starting from the top, going to the middle, going for the bottom. We've made sure that we don't have any gathers, or this isn't gathered or ruched up on the wire. We want it to be as flat as possible. And so then what we're going to do is you could see, and I also want to give you a little tip. This does work for me, but I think if it doesn't work for you, you can also take, and I'll do it on a piece of wire that hasn't been inserted. You could also take a pliers and bend it over at the end. And then what you want to do is just work that until you can get it to be as flat as possible. So you're just, you're going to be dealing with this rounded end as you're pushing it through, and that works very well. So this is the little ferrule I was talking about. It's something you see at the end of umbrella spokes and other things where it needs to have a cap or to join something. And before we've done that, I really want to have like enough to sort of play with. And I want this wire to be a little bit longer, or at least to overlap a little bit. Maybe not as much as I have it, but let me just see something. I might just take a little bit off. You can see what a weakling I am. I can't even cut a wire. Oh my goodness, maybe I need to get some new snips. Let's see here. Come on. Don't embarrass me. Let's see. There we go. Okay. So you see that sort of overlaps a little bit, just a little bit, maybe by like 3/16 or something. So what we're also going to do is we're going to take the cotton off of that, because this is quite a tight squeeze, and you can try it with the cotton on it, but I've tried it and it really it's difficult to get it into the ferrule with the cotton around it. It's just too thick, at least for me. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take a glue, and I'm using Weehaw here, and I'm just going to fill up from either end like you're filling a cannoli or something. And then I'm going to push that, it's glued, and I'm going to push that together as hard as I can. And I'm going to leave it to dry. I might even, just because I'm a little bit neurotic, just put a line of glue over it and coat it. So basically we need to let that dry. So what's basically happening is the wires are going into either side of the ferrule that's been filled with glue. They're going to set, they're going to dry. If you really want to make sure that it's in there good and tight, you could also, once it's dry, take your pliers and just give it a good crimp. That would work too. So I'm going to see if I can maybe, generally don't like to fool around with it while one's drying, but let me vindicate myself, my weakling status. Okay. Let's cut this. And then I think I'm just going to take a little bit off the end of this one. Okay. Let's try it with a little bit of, there's like 2 layers of thread on this. Let's try it with a layer of thread. Where's my rest of my ferrules? Let's try it with a layer of thread still on there. Let's actually just see, maybe you can like, okay, if you can get that top layer of thread off, you're going to be in business. Actually, let me just see, should I? Yeah, you can sort of like position these a little bit. So I'm going to do the same thing. Our next door neighbors have the most incredible landscaping, and now you know why, because they have landscapers who are there a lot, and they do such a beautiful job. Kind of jealous. Okay, so I'm just going to give this a little bit of glue on the ends. Just coat that with glue a bit, and then we're going to let that dry. I'm not going to do the top one, but I will come back and show it to you as she's wearing it, and maybe I'll give it a little press. You see, all you have to do is just take an iron, and this one's on, and just give it sort of like a gentle press going up to the wire, and it's going to have a nice, all those wrinkles are going to fall right out. So let's let that set. I'll be back and I'll show it to you when she's wearing it. So we've already made our crinoline. Now we're going to move on to the skirt. The skirt is very simple. Not sure if you're going to be able to see all of it in the small camera, but it basically is just 3 pieces. You're going to cut a front, both from the fabric and from the tarlatan, on a fold. You're going to cut the back, both from a fabric and the tarlatan, on a fold. And you're going to cut a side piece, 2 pieces from the fabric and 2 pieces from the tarlatan. So what you really want to do is you want to have mirrored pieces of these. These are going to be mirrored just on their own because they're folds. But you're going to want to have mirrored pieces of this. Now, this is a gorgeous fabric. There is a right and a wrong side to it. So I'm not sure. I've already sort of jumped ahead and I've put the skirt together, at least the beginnings of it. See, it has this like sort of dull side to it, and then it has this sort of luscious, shiny side. The shiny side is the right side. You could use whatever side you want, but that's the intention for this costume. So what we've done is we do this separately. You don't do this by flat lining or anything like that. You're going to create the front of the skirt, but you're not going to close it up all the way. You're going to leave it flat. You're going to do a side panel, your center panel, center front, side panel, and then you're going to do your back. And you're going to press all of your seams to the back of the garment. So I'll just show you how these seams are working. So these are pressed to the back. This is pressed to the back. These are pressed to the reverse because it's going towards the back. So you're going to do that, and you're going to press all your seams. You make sure that you do a nice press job. And then you're going to do the exact same thing with the tarlatan, but make sure that you've got a mirrored piece. So in other words, make sure that you have 2 pieces that are going to align exactly. So they're going to have to be done a little differently. In this case, the tarlatan case, from the right side, the side panel is on the left. In this case, from the right side, the side panel is on the right because you want them to match. So you can't have them both on the right. So what you're going to do then, and you're going to repeat everything that you did with the satin with the tarlatan. You're going to press those seams towards the back, and you're going to match up your bottom raw edge and all of your seams. Hopefully they all match up. If they don't, you could just trim away a little bit. Then you're going to sew them together, right sides together, with a 1/4 inch seam all along the bottom of this hem. So what we're going to do now, and I think I'm probably just going to do this because I feel like when you turn things, and this will make a little bit more sense. I'm not going to do all of this in front of you, but I'm just going to clip it, making sure not to clip into my stitching because you don't want that to happen, obviously, because then everything would just fall apart. What we're going to do then, and this is really why we haven't closed this off, is we're going to press. My iron's not on, but I can just explain this to you. We're going to press the seam allowance. So this is basically open. We're going to press the seam allowance towards the lining, and we're going to do that all the way across. And I think hopefully the sort of the clips will help you sort of get a nice curve to this, because there is sort of like in the very center back, there's kind of a very narrow, where is it? This is the center back, this sort of like narrow point. You just want to make sure that that curves beautifully. So I'm going to go away and I'm going to do that. I'll finish clipping this and then show you the next steps. We had clipped the bottom seam, we had pressed it towards the lining, and then I don't know if you can see this, but we've top stitched it, not on the fabric, but about a 1/16 of an inch onto the lining through that seam allowance. And now what we're going to do, and we did that all the way across, and I'm just going to tell you like a little story. You know, when I do these videos, sometimes it's kind of like later in the day, and today was kind of a doozy. So I make mistakes when I am tired, and that's what I probably will tell you. Don't sew when you're tired, because you will make mistakes. Well, who knows? Maybe you do your best work at night, but I make mistakes, and I don't like to make mistakes. So there it is. So I basically had sewn this the wrong way. I had to rip it out and do it again, which is what you do when you make a mistake. Doesn't look great, but there it is. So what we're going to do now, with right sides together, not wrong sides like I had it before, you're going to measure down. Well, first of all, I just want to make sure this is a nice flat surface. I've already given this a little press at the bottom, so it's going to remember that. Okay. I probably will even just give it a little bit of a press with this Cricut. Yeah, you can see where I made that mistake. Okay, so you're going to actually find the center of your center back. Okay, I think that's the center of the center back. And you are going to measure and mark, if I could find my measuring stick, you're going to measure and mark 4.5 inches down. Now you can see this sort of isn't like completely flat yet, but we're going to fix that. Okay, where are we going? Where are we here? Okay, this is 4.5. This is our center, approximately. Okay. So you can use a straight edge for this, whatever you want. I'm probably just going to use this straight edge. I'm going to draw a line down the center here. And then, because we don't want this shifting around too much, I am going to secure it with a couple of pins. I could already see this is not going to be the best because of these that flub I made, but I'll live with it. So what you're going to do is you're going to stitch on either side of this line. This is going to be your opening, your back opening. And you're going to want to, you're going to want to stay pretty close to it, but sometimes I like to just, and I'm also trying to compensate for that mistake I made. I'll draw a line on either side of it. I think yours, if you haven't made a mistake, should be closer to the middle line. So I'm going to go away and stitch that, and then come back. We're going to very carefully cut down that center line, making sure not to go into our stitches at the bottom. And then we're going to turn this inside out, and then I will show you the next step. So here's our back opening. We sewed it right sides together. There, see? It's too late at night. We've sewn it right sides together. We sewed on either side of that 4.5 inch line, and yours is going to be much tighter and much nicer than this because you wouldn't have made a mistake like I did. And then you're going to turn this inside out. You're going to actually clip into that. If you have a little corner here, just be careful not to clip into the corner because it will fray like that. And now this is going to seem a little bit odd, but this is how we're actually going to put this skirt together. We're going to close it up. So we're going to start to close our sides. And you'll see how this works when we turn it inside out. It will all be one skirt. So I'm just going to keep doing that. I'm going to pin this all the way around. It's going to be a little bit odd. I mean, I think I probably, let me see. I think I'm probably going to want to start at the bottom just to get this a little bit better aligned. Now, if you have to do this, you might have to do this in 2 passes. You might, I don't know how dexterous you are with your sewing machines, and I am I'm not dexterous for sure, but you're going to want to sew across, sew this together, and then what you're basically going to be doing is continuing to sew it together on this edge. And that's what makes it a little bit odd. And I think you see how this sort of is hard to position. So what I would do is I would sew this first, and I might even want to press that seam to the side. And then once that seam is done, yeah, there's something that's a little funky here. I don't know what it is, but we'll figure it out. Okay. So I'm going to sew that together. Across here, I'm going to stop. Let's see. I think maybe I'll stop into the tarlatan. And then I'm going to turn this again inside out so these two faces are together. And I'll show you what that looks like after I come back and do this one seam. So this is what this looks like when you turn it inside out. What you're basically doing, imagine that this is, it's a little hard to imagine, but imagine that this is like an open, sort of similar to the hem of the skirt. And what you've done is, right sides together, you've sewn, and not with the lining, there's a separately, you've closed up the seam on the satin, and then you've closed up, continuing on, you've closed up the seam on the tarlatan, and then basically you turn it inside out. And you have a completely lined skirt. So I'm going to need to press the seam towards the back like I had done before. And our next step will be, you're going to want to give it a nice press, and I see some wrinkles and such. And look how prettily this hem is with that top stitching only on the lining side. It just lies so nicely, and I haven't even pressed this. And look at that nice crisp edge. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this a press, and then within, I see some things that I want to even off a little bit. Stuff happens, things stretch. I'm going to, within the 1/4 inch seam allowance, I'm going to run a basting stitch along the top of this. Because really the next step that we're going to do is we're going to be doing our waistband, and we want these pieces to stay together. So let me go away and do that, clean that up, and then we will proceed with the waistband. We're going to now address the skirt waistband. And the measurement given, or the pattern piece that you have, may be a little bit too large for your doll's waist. So it's important that you measure your doll's waist. And what I did in this case is I cut the waistband out of the fabric, and I brought it around the doll's waist, and I just want to see where I want it to overlap. And once I had I think I probably want it maybe not even a 1/4 inch overlap. And then I found the center. And then I found the 2 end points for the back of the skirt, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the center of the skirt in the front. And then I'm going to apply the waistband, at least pin it in place here. And so you're going to need to pleat up this from the front side seam all the way to the back edge. You're going to need to pleat that up to fit within this space. Now, there's no directions in nothing in your pattern that's going to show you how to do this, but you're just going to have to, do it a couple of times. Pull some of these threads off until you find the pleating distance that works. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to I'm probably going to take 3 relatively large pleats, and I like to try to align them at the top if I can. So once you figure it out on this side, you'll do it identically on the other side. Let's see here. That first pleat might be a little bit too big, but you can always adjust it. Let's see. You know, if you really want to, you can also base these pleats together, which you're going to be doing in the next step. Oh, I need to take it up even a little bit more. You need to, you might want to just base these pleats together because it'll give you an idea of, and put it on your doll over her crinoline. It might give you an idea of how the skirt's falling, how the pleats appear. Remember, these back pleats are going to be covered by the back of the bodice. You know, that's about right, by the back of the bodice. So I don't think you need to necessarily, well, I mean, you want it to look pretty. But since I've done this before, I think this is what I'm going to go with. So I'm going to go to the next side, and I took a pretty big pleat here. And let's just secure that. So that it's not tricky, but the thing to remember about this pattern is that the skirt waistband is pretty much a straight line rather than a curve. So when you're pleating, you want to make sure that your raw edge at the top is even. Yeah, I actually think I'm gonna do this a little bit less and then do this one. See, there's really no science to it. It's just about bringing the fullness in. So you might look at both of them together. Yeah, I don't really think I like that. Let me do this again. So this one actually started a little bit farther over. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good fit. So I'm going to just do a little bit of adjusting up here to make sure that our top is even. I'm going to base the pleats down. And then once they're basted, I'm going to apply the waistband. Now, I pressed up about 1/4 inch on one of the long edges. The raw edges against the raw edge of the upper part of the skirt, of the waist of the skirt. So what we're going to do is we're going to sew this across with our 1/4 inch seam allowance. And when you do your basting, make sure it's within 1/4 inch seam allowance. You had already basted the top of this just to keep the two layers together before you pleated it. And then I'm going to turn in these ends so they align with the edge of the back opening. I'm going to turn it over, I'm going to tuck this under, and I'm going to slip stitch it to the seam. So I think one thing I'm going to recommend in this video is that once you have the skirt done, you know, I think in the instructions it says to apply the hook and eye at the very end as a finishing touch, but I think you can apply your hook and eye. It's going to be a hook and a thread loop for the waist closure. Then I would basically set it aside because this is a pretty simple skirt, but as you can see here, it's going to be embellished. And it's going to be embellished with these tabs of silk that are trimmed with the faux chenille fur and little bits of fur. And then the back is going to have the tabs put on as well. So I would say, you know, it's always nice to think about embellishments as they work together across the entire outfit. So what I would do is I would finish the skirt, finish the waistband. You can put it on your doll, see how it looks. I would set it aside, and then I would move on to the bodice. And so just let's talk a little bit about the bodice, and I'll come back and show you. Show you a little bit more as we get started. So this is a very, very form-fitting bodice. And, you know, it's designed so it's very snug here, and then it flares out over the skirt. So I would recommend that you do a muslin mock-up. And I would, you know, you don't have to make an entire one. You don't have to do 2 sleeves, but I would do at least 2 backs, 2 fronts, 2 sides, put those all together, and then just do 1 sleeve just to see how it fits prior. Now, I've made this pattern before, and on my, you know, and this could very well be the seam allowance I used. I felt like it was a little bit snug in the front, so I'm going to actually alter the pattern so there's a little bit more of an overlap. You don't have to do this. It's just something that I noticed. It was probably my seam allowance, because sometimes I go larger than 1/4 inch without knowing it. So I'm not going to do a muslin for this because I've already made one of these for one of the other kits, but I'm going to then cut these pattern pieces out. Notice that you have to join them before you cut them. It's very clear on the instructions how you're going to do that. So I'm going to finish the waistband. I'm going to cut these out, cut them out of the fabric, and then walk away. I think also another thing is that you don't need to cut the tarlatan. So I'm just going to scratch that out. There should be a loose note, excuse me, in your instructions that says you don't need to cut these out of tarlatan. It would just be too stiff and unwieldy. You just need the fabric, which is the blue silk, and the lining material for all the pieces you see here. So I will go away, work on the waistband, and cut these out, and come back and show you the finished skirt without the decoration and the beginnings of our bodice. Well, it's a sunny morning here in Ohio, and I just wanted to show you, before we move on to the bodice, the waistband of the skirt. As you can see, it's been turned over and slip stitched, and we have a hook and a thread loop at the back. There might be a little bit of overlap there, that's fine. All of this is going to be covered by the bodice back. So there that is. And as I think I mentioned, we're going to wait to trim this until the bodice is done so we can trim them both together, since they will be complementary trims.
Remember to like, subscribe, and hit that notification button.